Take a slow breath. Let the weight of the day soften. Here in this quiet corner of words and wonder, stories unfold like incense in the dark gently, without force. If you find yourself drawn to truths wrapped in human longing, you're in the right place. Subscribe and let the stillness speak. Clara's apartment smelled of lavender and regret. The city lights flickered through her window, casting shadows on the half-empty wine glass she held too tightly. She was 34, married for 6 years to Ethan, a man whose steadiness once felt like home, but now felt like a cage. Their marriage had started with laughter, late-night confessions, and promises whispered under starlit skies. But somewhere along the way, the warmth had faded, replaced by routines and silences that stretched too long. Clara wasn't sure when she stopped feeling seen, but tonight, the ache was louder than ever. It didn't help that her best friend, Lila, was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through her phone, recounting her latest fling with a married coworker named Marcus. Lila's stories were always vivid stolen glances in the office, secret texts, the thrill of a hotel room booked under a false name. Clara listened, her heart twisting. She envied Lila's freedom, the way she danced through life without guilt. But there was something else too, a spark of resentment. Lila knew Ethan had dined at their table, yet her stories never acknowledged the weight of Clara's vows. Ethan, meanwhile, was at a work dinner, or so he said. Clara didn't ask anymore. She'd found a receipt once for a bar he never mentioned, and though she told herself it was nothing, the doubt had taken root. At the office, Ethan had his own temptations. His assistant, Sophie, had a laugh that lingered, a way of leaning in too close when they reviewed reports. He told himself it was harmless, but he'd started staying late, not because of deadlines, but because Sophie's presence made him feel alive in a way Clara hadn't in years. Then there was Marcus, Lila's lover, who was married to Nina, a woman who sensed something was wrong but couldn't name it. Nina poured her energy into her yoga classes, her friendships, her job, but the emptiness followed her. She'd lie awake, wondering why Marcus seemed so distant, why his excuses felt rehearsed. The web of their lives, Clara and Ethan, Lila and Marcus, Nina and her quiet suspicions, was a tangle of desire and deception, each thread pulling tighter. Clara poured another glass of wine, her thoughts drifting to a night last month. She'd met a stranger at a gallery opening, a painter with eyes that seemed to see through her. They'd talked for hours, and when he brushed her hand, she didn't pull away. Nothing happened, but the memory of that touch burned. She hadn't told Ethan. She hadn't told anyone. But it was there, a secret she carried like a stone in her chest. This is where we begin, a group of people bound by love, loyalty, and betrayal, each chasing something they can't quite name. Clara, trapped in her marriage, yearning for more. Ethan, flirting with temptation, unsure why he's drifting. Lila, chasing thrills, blind to the wreckage she leaves. Marcus, living a double life, torn between guilt and desire. And Nina, holding on to a love she fears is slipping away. Their stories are messy, human, and all too real. But beneath the chaos, there's a deeper truth, one that Buddhist wisdom might help us untangle. The city hummed outside Clara's window, but inside the air felt heavy with unspoken truths. She set her wine glass down, glancing at Lila, who was still lost in her phone, giggling at a text from Marcus. Clara wanted to ask how Lila justified it, how she could sleep knowing Marcus went home to Nina, kissed her goodnight and lied. But she didn't. Instead, she stood, walked to the kitchen, and busied herself with dishes that didn't need washing. Her reflection in the sink's chrome showed tired eyes, a woman wrestling with her own desires. Across town, Ethan sat at the bar of a sleek restaurant, Sophie beside him. The work dinner had ended, but they'd stayed, sharing a bottle of red and stories that felt too personal for colleagues. Sophie's hand grazed his arm as she laughed, and Ethan felt a rush he hadn't known in years. He thought of Clara waiting at home, and guilt flickered. But it was faint, drowned by the warmth of Sophie's attention. He told himself he'd go home soon, that this was just a moment, not a choice. But moments, he was learning, had a way of becoming more. Meanwhile, Nina was at her yoga studio, guiding a late class through Savasana. Her voice was calm, but her mind churned. Marcus had been late again, his excuse a client, meeting too vague. She'd found a hotel key card in his jacket last week, one he swore was from a business trip. She wanted to believe him, but her gut whispered otherwise. As her students breathed deeply, Nina felt her own breath catch. She wondered if she was losing him or if she'd already lost herself. Back at Clara's, Lila finally looked up. "You're quiet tonight," she said, her tone light but probing. Clara shrugged, drying her hands. "Just tired." Lila tilted her head, unconvinced. "You sure? You've been weird since that gallery thing." Clara froze. She hadn't told Lila about the painter, but Lila had a knack for sniffing out secrets. "Nothing happened," Clara said, too quickly. Lila smirked. "Sure. But if it did, you'd tell me, right?" Clara forced a smile, but her stomach twisted. She wasn't sure who she was protecting, Ethan, herself, or the fragile illusion of her life. The truth was, they were all hiding something. Clara, her fleeting connection with the painter. Ethan, his growing pull toward Sophie. Lila, her affair with Marcus. Marcus, his double life. Nina, her quiet fear. Each carried their secrets like weights, believing they were alone in their struggle. But Buddhist teachings remind us, suffering arises from attachment to desires, to outcomes, to the stories we tell ourselves. Clara wanted passion, Ethan, excitement, Lila, freedom, Marcus, escape, Nina, certainty. Yet their clinging only tightened the knots. In Buddhism, the Four Noble Truths offer a map through suffering. First, acknowledge the pain. Monogamy, for Clara, felt like a prison because she craved something beyond it. Ethan's restlessness stemmed from chasing fleeting highs. Lila's thrill-seeking masked a fear of emptiness. Marcus's lies hid his inability to face himself. Nina's anxiety came from grasping at a love she couldn't control. The second truth is that suffering has a cause, their attachments to these desires. The third is that freedom is possible. And the fourth? A path to liberation, one that requires seeing clearly and letting go. The night deepened, and Clara's apartment felt smaller, as if the walls were closing in on her secrets. Lila had left, her laughter lingering like a perfume Clara couldn't escape. Alone now, Clara sat on the couch, her phone in hand, scrolling through old photos of her and Ethan. A beach trip, his arm around her, both of them smiling. When had they stopped looking at each other like that? She wanted to call him, to ask where he was, but pride or fear kept her silent. Instead, she opened a text from the painter, a message she hadn't deleted. "You looked like you needed to be seen." Her thumb hovered over the reply button, heart racing. At the restaurant, Ethan's laughter faded as Sophie leaned closer, her voice soft. "You don't talk about Clara much," she said, not accusing, just curious. Ethan shrugged, swirling his wine. "We're fine. Just married." Sophie nodded, but her eyes held a question he didn't want to answer. He glanced at his watch past 11. Clara would be waiting, maybe wondering. He told himself he'd leave soon, but his body stayed routed, drawn to the ease of this moment, so different from the tension at home. Nina, meanwhile, was locking up the yoga studio, her mind replaying Marcus's recent distance. She tried talking to him, but his answers were always short, his eyes elsewhere. Tonight, she'd found a text on his phone, nothing damning, just a smiley face from a contact labeled L. She hadn't confronted him, but the discovery sat like a stone in her chest. Driving home, she turned on a podcast about mindfulness, hoping it would quiet her thoughts. The speaker's voice, calm and steady, reminded her to breathe, to observe her pain without judgment. But how do you observe a breaking heart? Across town, Marcus was in his car, parked outside Lila's apartment. He'd told Nina he was working late, but here he was, texting Lila to come down. Their affair was a fire intense, consuming, but destined to burn out. He knew it was wrong, knew Nina deserved better, but Lila's wild energy pulled him in ways he couldn't explain. When Lila slid into the passenger seat, her perfume sharp and sweet, he felt alive again. "You're late," she teased, but her eyes were soft, almost tender. For a moment he wondered if she cared, or if this was just a game to her. Buddhism teaches that desire is a flame beautiful, but dangerous. The second noble truth points to craving as the root of suffering. Clara craved connection, Ethan chased novelty, Lila sought thrills, Marcus ran from guilt, and Nina clung to hope. Each was trapped in a cycle of wanting, unable to see that their pain came not from their circumstances, but from their attachment to what they thought would save them. The Buddha's path invites us to pause, to notice the craving without feeding it. Clara could text the painter, but would it fill the void? Ethan could stay with Sophie, but would it last? Nina could confront Marcus, but would it bring peace? The answers lie not in action, but in awareness. The morning light spilled through Clara's curtains, soft but unforgiving. She hadn't slept well, her dreams a tangle of Ethan's face and the painter's voice. She made coffee, the routine grounding her, but her thoughts kept drifting to the text she hadn't answered. Ethan had come home late, slipping into bed without a word. She'd lain awake, listening to his breathing, wondering if he smelled of someone else's perfume. Now, as he shuffled into the kitchen, eyes heavy, she felt a wall between them. "Late night?" she asked, her voice light but edged. "Yeah, work stuff," he mumbled, avoiding her gaze. The lie hung there, fragile but unbroken. At Lila's apartment, the morning was different, bright, unburdened. She stretched in bed, replaying her night with Marcus. His intensity, his guilt, the way he looked at her like she was both salvation and ruin. She didn't love him, not really, but she loved the way he made her feel alive, wanted, free. She texted Clara, inviting her for brunch, hoping to coax out whatever was eating at her friend. Lila wasn't blind. She'd seen Clara's restlessness, the way her eyes lingered on strangers. She wondered if Clara was finally cracking, if monogamy was wearing her down too. Nina, meanwhile, sat at her kitchen table, a cup of tea gone cold. Marcus had come home after midnight, his excuse as flimsy as ever. She'd wanted to ask about the text, the keycard, the distance, but fear stopped her. What if he admitted it? What if he left? Instead, she'd smiled, kissed him, and pretended everything was fine. Now, alone, she opened her journal, writing words she couldn't say aloud. I'm losing him, and I don't know how to stop it. The Buddhist concept of impermanence came to mind. Everything changes, nothing lasts. But knowing that didn't ease the ache of watching her marriage slip through her fingers. Ethan, at the office, stared at his computer, Sophie's laughter echoing in his mind. He'd crossed no line, not really, but the pull was there, stronger each day. He thought of Clara, her sharp eyes catching his every move, and felt a pang of guilt. But guilt wasn't enough to stop him from texting Sophie, asking her to grab coffee later. Just coffee, he told himself. Just a moment to feel something again. The Buddhist third noble truth promises that suffering can end not by getting what we want, but by letting go of the wanting. Clara's longing for the painter, Ethan's flirtation with Sophie, Lila's affair, Marcus's lies, Nina's clinging, they were all chasing illusions, mistaking fleeting pleasure for lasting peace. The path to Nirvana begins with seeing this clearly. Meditation, the Buddha taught, helps us observe our desires without being ruled by them. Clara could sit with her restlessness, Ethan with his temptation, Nina with her fear, and see them for what they are, passing clouds, not the sky itself. Brunch was loud, the cafe buzzing, with chatter and clinking glasses. Clara sat across from Lila, picking at her avocado toast, her thoughts elsewhere. Lila, radiant in a red sundress, was mid-story about a weekend getaway she'd planned with Marcus. We're going to this cabin upstate, she said, eyes sparkling. No Wi-Fi, no distractions, just us. Clara nodded, but her chest tightened. She pictured Nina alone, wondering where Marcus was. She wanted to snap at Lila, to ask how she could be so careless, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she sipped her mimosa, the bubbles sharp on her tongue. Across town, Ethan was at a coffee shop with Sophie, their table tucked in a corner. She was telling a story about her last vacation, her hands animated, and Ethan found himself smiling too easily. He knew he should pull back, keep things professional, but Sophie's energy was a drug. When their knees brushed under the table, neither moved away. He thought of Clara at brunch, probably laughing with Lila, and wondered if she'd notice if he stopped coming home on time. The thought stung, but not enough to make him leave. Nina was at the park, walking her dog, trying to clear her head. The sun was warm, but her thoughts were cold. She'd found another clue this morning, a receipt for a dinner she hadn't shared. She hadn't confronted Marcus yet, but the evidence was piling up, each piece a cut she couldn't ignore. She paused by a pond, watching ripples spread from a tossed stone. A Buddhist saying surfaced. Holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal to throw at someone else you burn first. She wanted to let go, but how? Marcus was her anchor, her future. Without him, who was she? Marcus, meanwhile, was at the gym, lifting weights to drown out his thoughts. Lila's texts lit up his phone, each one a reminder of the life he was juggling. He loved Nina's steadiness, her kindness, but Lila's fire was addictive. He hated himself for it, but not enough to stop. Each rep was a prayer for clarity, but none came. He wondered if Nina suspected, if Clara knew, if Ethan sensed anything. The web was tightening, and he was at its center. The Buddha's fourth noble truth offers a path, the Eightfold Path, a guide to ethical living, mindful awareness, and mental clarity. For Clara, right speech might mean honesty with Ethan, even if it scares her. For Ethan, right intention could mean examining why he's drawn to Sophie. For Lila, right action might mean ending her affair, sparing Nina's pain. For Marcus, right mindfulness could mean facing his choices without excuses. For Nina, right concentration might mean meditating on her own worth, not Marcus's love. These steps aren't easy, but they lead to freedom, not from monogamy, but from the hell we create within it. The evening settled over the city like a soft exhale, the sky bruised with purple and gold. Clara stood in her kitchen, staring at the dinner she'd made for Ethan, roast chicken, his favorite, though she wasn't sure why she'd bothered. He'd texted he'd be late again, no explanation. She thought of the painter's message, still unanswered, and the weight of her own silence. She wanted to feel alive, not just exist, but every choice felt like a betrayal of Ethan, of herself, of the life they'd built. She poured a glass of water, set it down, and closed her eyes, breathing deeply. A moment of stillness, a Buddhist practice. Just observe, don't judge. The ache was there, but so was something else, a quiet strength, a whisper of possibility. Ethan was still at the office, Sophie gone, but her presence lingering. He'd stayed behind to finish a report, or so he told himself, but really, he was avoiding home. Clara's questions, her sharp glances, made him feel exposed. He loved her, he did, but love felt heavy now, like a debt he couldn't pay. He opened his phone, saw Sophie's last text, a simple, "See you tomorrow," and deleted it. Not because he wanted to, but because he knew he should. Right effort, the Buddha might say, choosing actions that lead to peace, not pain. Ethan wasn't there yet, but the thought flickered, a seed planted. Nina was at home, Marcus in the shower, his phone left on the counter. She didn't touch it, didn't need to. She decided to talk to him tonight, not with anger, but with clarity. She'd spent the day meditating, sitting with her fear, letting it pass through her like wind through leaves. The Buddha's teaching on non-attachment didn't mean giving up love. It meant loving without clinging. If Marcus was cheating, she'd face it. If he left, she'd survive. Her worth wasn't his to define. She lit a candle, its flame steady, and felt a calm she hadn't known in months. Marcus, drying off, felt the weight of Nina's silence. She hadn't asked about his day, hadn't pried, but her quiet was louder than any accusation. He thought of Lila, their plans for the cabin, and felt a pang of dread. Not for Nina finding out, but for what he was becoming. Right view, the Buddha's path begins, seeing life as it is, not as we wish it to be. Marcus wasn't ready to end things with Lila, but he couldn't ignore the truth anymore. He was hurting everyone, himself included. Here are 3 ways to transform monogamy's hell into nirvana. First, practice mindfulness. Sit with your feelings, restlessness, temptation, fear, without acting on them. Notice them, name them, let them pass. Clara could meditate on her longing, Ethan on his guilt, Nina on her strength. Second, embrace honest communication. Speak your truth kindly, as Clara might with Ethan or Nina with Marcus. It's not about blame, but about connection. Third, cultivate self-compassion. Love yourself first, as Nina is learning. Monogamy isn't a cage when you're free within yourself. If something in this story stayed with you, don't keep it quiet. Share it. Someone else may be waiting for just this kind of reminder. Subscribe for more stories where heartache meets healing and the unseen becomes known. Remember, even the darkest entanglements can lead us back to light.